get started. Before we do, let's just pray, and then Bob is going to come and give us the fireside chat. You're not going to get it from me today. Let's just pray. Papa, thank you so much for this day. God, thank you for what you're doing in and through Adventures and Missions and everybody here, the personnel, the leadership. God, we thank you that in every season of our lives, we look at you. You are the answer to everything we need, we want, and that we ever want to have. And we just pray now that as Bob just speaks to us, thank you for insight, thank you for peace, thank you for hope that we can find even in this. And we thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Wow. Well, good afternoon. Couple of reasons we wanted to get everybody together today. When we did our quarterly, which is often a time where we look at kind of what our goals were for the year from a ministry perspective and how we're doing financially and where we feel like God's leading us, we actually kind of intentionally chose to take that time because we had some of the folks that have been a part of this even before most of us were here with Andrew and with the addition of Ethan. We wanted to take that opportunity to really talk about DNA, why we do what we do, what originally started what we're doing today, and what God might do with it in the future, because a lot's changing, obviously, in the nature of our relationship with G42. So we took some things and we set it outside of our normal quarterly. Some of our personnel stuff, all the financials. So the first reason that I wanted to spend some time with you today was to fulfill that update. Hi, Nicole, you're back too. To hinge off of that update and provide that information. The second thing was, and it's why you got kind of an encouragement for me to come, is we're seeing some pretty substantial changes in the way that people are responding and engaging with us as participants. And I look at this as a team, as a family, and one of my commitments to you guys is to communicate very effectively and to try to make sure everybody understands as we walk this journey together what we see happening, what we think is happening both out the front windshield and in the rearview mirror that we have to see what's happening behind us. And so today, I'm going to walk us down that path a little bit. I'm going to share with you kind of how I see it as a person that sits in a seat trying to figure all this stuff out every day, and to look at all the dimensions of our ministry in terms of the kingdom impact and in terms of the people that choose to journey with us and why that may or may not be changing underneath our feet as we go. And so, that's our objectives. The first thing I'll do is give you a quick agenda, because it is a fireside chat, and one of the big objectives is to create a forum where we can have a dialogue, where you can ask questions, and to the best of my ability, I'm gonna answer those questions as candidly and transparently as possible. But the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to do a very high-level review of our strategic objectives. As a reminder, leadership goes through a pretty rigorous process every year of praying into and looking at where the Lord's leading us for the coming year. Compare that against what our mission statement is, make sure it all lines up, and then build an operational plan and a financial plan around where that leading is. And establish where we think that will land in terms of objectives so that we can say, how are we doing against that? So today I'm going to spend a little bit of time traveling down the path of those objectives. I'm going to take a quick look at the fruit, which is really, frankly, very encouraging to me. There are a lot of things changing in the nature of our ministry. And some of these things are things that we kind of started talking about 2, 3, and 4 years ago, kind of started planning over the last 2 or 3 years. And today, things are happening while we're sleeping that are different than what happened 2 and 3 and 4 years ago. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. Now, we're going to look at the current trends and projections. I'm going to take a look at kind of a 5-year view of what's been happening in our largest programs. And then I'm going to take a look at our current projections as it relates to what we had budgeted for this year from a participant perspective. The next bullet point, which is drivers behind what we are seeing. I mean, the first question once we review that is going to be, what do we think is happening here? And I'm going to share with you what I think we see. And this is something that a number of us spend a lot of time on. Spend a lot of time talking to the marketing department, a lot of time talking to our leaders and trying to understand what's driving. A lot of what is happening is outside of these four walls in just our culture and what those implications are to us. The next piece is the management plan forward. Given the information that we have, what is going to be the path that we're going to take going forward, and what are some of the basic timelines of that path? And then I'm going to end with just an open forum for questions. There'll be no bad questions. And guys, I want to create as safe and as open a forum as possible to answer any questions that you might have. All right. I don't know how to, I got this, my kids gave me this new watch, and I'm getting phone calls on it, and I don't know how to stop it. I should just wear a Timex. I mean, I don't even use it. So, I shouldn't say that on, my kids may watch this thing. Can you cut that out for me, Drew? Thank you. We take our strategic objectives and we break them out in the framework of our mission statement. So let's remember, what is our mission statement? Number one, we mobilize a generation of radicals. Number two, leg to that stool is we seek to disciple and train in all elements of our engagement with people. And the third piece is we want to see the kingdom of God established. So where is he working, and where is he calling us to work alongside him in his work? And so if you look at mobilization, one of the primary objectives, and we got a whole page for each one of these. What I've done here is kind of collapse them into general categories. And I'm just going to give you, because you guys probably don't wake up every morning and read them, so I'll just give you some reflection on what that is. Number one, we clarify expectations and training to the expectations. What does that mean? In the past, honestly, we did a lot of things to attract as many people as possible with the expectation and the hope that if we could get them in this environment, we'd be able to disciple them, right? We're finding over time that we want to probably change strategies because we're not sure that works well. And we want to look at the underlying value system of the people that are coming to us. We don't need people that are high and mighty and holy, but we certainly don't believe this is a good platform to possibly invite people in from the perspective that fundamentally disagree with who we are and the way that we see the gospel of Jesus Christ. So having expectations of a racer, making sure that at training camps and a lot of our communication before they come here, that we're setting very clear expectations as to what this journey is and why we have it. And actually being okay with this is probably not a good fit for you because of our differences in views on this journey. So that is in place. We feel like we're on track. The next one is we had a whole series of objectives for mobilization. The number of people that would say yes and go on the trip with us. And I won't get it exactly right, but World Race was flat to a little bit up versus last year, and Gap Year was a little bit up from last year. And the rest of our programs were pretty well close to flat. That was our objectives. I'm going to share a lot more detail towards the end, but you'll see when we get to it that we're falling well short of where we expected to be at this point. And we'll look at those details. The next piece of mobilization was parent engagement. And I'm going to set parent engagement aside and say really the shifting of short-term missions and the way that we look at it. In the past, our short-term missions strategy, probably for the past 5 or 6 years, has been to look for sites that had attractive engagement opportunities internationally and do a good job of marketing those opportunities to churches and to individuals. What we realized in that process is the number of people that established a sufficient enough relationship that they would come back was fairly small. So I don't want to use the word transactional, but to a large degree, our short-term sending process had become fairly transactional. And over time, as a result of the lack of relationship, we would see it get smaller and smaller over time. So we said, we're going to take a step back. And there were 2 basic strategies that we felt like the Lord was giving us. One was, we're going to narrow from a lot of trips internationally to a narrower group of trips that present a higher possibility of partnership. And we did that not as well as we may have liked. It was our first iteration. It caused us to get our trips out late from a posting perspective, and that probably resulted in a little less engagement. But at the end of the day, we reduced our number of trips posted by somewhere around 50% as a function of that core value set. The next thing that we wanted to look into and to begin to build strategy around was that of engagement of Xers and boomers. And built on our experience and other long-term mission sending opportunities like Matamoros many years ago, and frankly, Swaziland over the last decade, we felt like if we could get people to see a long-term engagement opportunity through relationship, where they came along people they had confidence in, that we could invite them into not a short-term mission trip, but a long-term relationship with a community in the areas that we work all around the world. One of the neat things was we have these things called PVTs. We're sending 600 to 700 people a year that are probably average high 40s, low 50s in age to these locations. And going back 2 years, we decided to move much of the mobilization of PVTs to our bases because we knew we could establish a strategic plan of engagement over the long term. And in that, we decided that we would cast vision to the parents before they leave, engage them in that vision while they're on ministry with their racers, with their gappers. And at the end of that, we extended an invitation to join us in a journey of partnership-based ministry, and we're thinking about 3 years as our minimum. So we want to get out of the transactional and into the relational. We are through our first series of maybe 7 or 8 over the past 60 days, Joe, PVTs that have occurred at bases. And we'll go into some of the stories at some point. But the fruit of that is beyond what we had targeted. So the number of people that are interested in coming back, the funding that took place for the projects that were happening on the ground, I think we exceeded 100% of the time, and in some cases exceeded the goal by 400%. So taking the opportunity to now invite in these older folks, people my age, people Joe's age, into a longer-term engagement, we think will work. And it will be the way that we're able to rebuild STM around some core values that we think will both establish sustainability and also be more productive in the nature in which they engage on the field. You'll see some of the results of that in a second. The next piece is base leaders. We want elders, mentors, and other supporting missionaries on the field at each of our bases. We have a lot of very specific objectives. We've been able to get elders in place at most of our bases. We are still working diligently to get Southeast Asia covered. And frankly, with the volume of throughput that are going through some of our bases, add in more mentors and more elders where we have more than one couple at even the locations that we have today. And we're making progress against that end. If you go in and look at Bob Quarter's whiteboard today, you'll see in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 names that are in some form or process of working their way into the potential of, frankly, facilitating ministry with our squads over the long term. And we see a lot of potential with that. It's had a positive impact in GAP. The next one is disciple and train. We wanted to get leadership development and all that we've been doing there fully implemented. And we also wanted the assimilation of mission, community, and intimacy, which has started its way as a framework for our ministry in GAP about 3 years ago, worked its way into World Race, such that the training camps are now largely built around those core elements of our ministry, and then begin to use that framework to invest in the people that we work with here. So that in the survey, it was very profound that mission is the area that you guys have the most appetite and maybe some of the biggest opportunity for growth, understanding what mission is and how you walk in that mission. And so we're going to be investing in that pretty significantly, and it would be a good time maybe, Scott, for you to come up and share a little bit about the path that we're on for that.
Yeah.
Sanbonan Basawani. Ebo.
Ebo.
Siyabonga Kulu. Okay, we're excited about this whole mission thing. I was sitting there thinking, and I'm kind of nervous. I don't know why I'm nervous right now, but I was thinking about how we started several years ago calling our organization Adventures, and how I never really adapted to that, and I never really liked it, because the name of our organization is Adventures in Missions. So we're bringing some of the mission back. How about that? So in order for us to really focus on mission, community, and intimacy with our participants, we want to bring a lot more of that ethos, a lot more of that basis of understanding and growth and proficiency to our staff. It starts with us, and it goes to the people that we ask to come journey with us, and we take it from there. So as you've all seen in your email inboxes and the calendar invites. Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Can't miss it. Yeah, can't miss it. Starting in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a series of trainings for the staff in mission, and we're going to be focusing on a lot of areas of mission. What's God's mission to redeem His creation? How do we engage more deeply in culture to share our faith? How do we talk about church planting, and what does that language really mean among us? And I think that's going to really set a baseline and really help us all out in that area. Our team was together yesterday, kind of finalizing some of the revisions to lesson plans, and I was really excited to see that this thing is going to be not only informative but interactive. I think you're going to get some tools that you're going to be able to take back actually into your job that you do here and apply it to things in the way that you, whatever your job is. It's going to affect all of us in a very positive way. So we're going to learn some things about that. We're going to stage it in a way that it also can help all of you guys understand kind of how we're posturing this in terms of how we're going to train participants in it too. So you're going to be equipped in that way as well. And I just think it's going to be really good. So please accept your calendar invite. And we're excited to be there with you guys and just to continue to be adventures in missions. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. The second, the final piece in that disciple and train, BCWI, Best Christian Workplace International Incorporated Institute. We had a number of initiatives around the areas where we were the weakest based on the last survey that we did. And the macro view of that is we had a 3.85, and our objective was to get it to a 4 this year, which is really, when you talk to the experts in this that work with lots and lots of companies, that's really at the very highest end of what they see organizations making progress against. But we're tackling it. One of the things was communication, and we're trying to do a better job of that. Some of what we're doing here today. The next piece is establish the kingdom. We are making significant shifts in the way that we approach our ministry around the world. And the nature in which we do that, I shared a little bit about our short-term missions sending strategy, but much of how we do that takes years to build out as a function of how we release routes, design routes, release routes, go on journeys. Oftentimes, we're today looking at 2020 and 2021 as we sit here today. So any changes that we want to make in form or fashion begins today and begins to look out over time. One of the huge shifts, as an example of that, is our historic practice was, when we were growing so quickly in some of our core programs, was to develop kind of new route structures with each launch window. And we had a set of criteria that would drive those route structures. Well, with us trying to get a lot more strategic, and instead of needing to go wide, desiring to go much deeper in the nature in which we engage with people around the world, things that we held as one of our assets in the past, we're actually shifting the way that we look at it. And in the past, we had developed a network across 61 countries of 1,200 or so regularly, and even a larger number than that we visited historically, but regularly visited ministry hosts. And we are taking that both in the context of short-term missions, but also ambassador, passport, gap year, world race, and we're condensing that to where you're likely to see in the coming years maybe only 7 or 8 routes that are adjusted a little bit over time, but they're consistently run east to west and west to east so that we can continue to improve a lot of dimensions of our ministry. The nature in which we engage, the depth of partnership. What if it looked like us engaging with our bases, 8 to 10, strategic ministry partners, 20 to 50, and then maybe 200 or 300 other partners that we know better than we can know 11 or 1,200 partners. And to begin to build our long-term route plans around that objective. And that's happening today. Our first release under that primary framework is the January 2020 routes. And we are, the regional team is actively engaged in doing development plans, strategic development plans with a lot of our high-throughput partner-based ministries, ICM and the likes. And we are doing development plans for every base. All of the PVTs that have run through our bases are running through a framework of a development plan, so they're not coming into a random ministry, but rather they're coming into a pre-planned engagement that's a part of a longer story. And that's all happening today. That's happened on the PVTs that you guys have launched in the last few months. So in terms of development plans, strategic ministry partners, and moving towards relational short-term ministry, making significant progress and feel like the fruit from that is going to be a good thing over time. So what has been the fruit of our labor? We've got some improvement to do on how we measure how ministry partners view us. I'm going to share this with you. It's not up on a slide. But we, if you haven't noticed, some of our alumni have had some grievances with us. Some of it very warranted, and some of it out of places that we couldn't even get to having a conversation with them to even understand it. But at the end of the day, we seek to receive feedback, and to the degree that we can take that feedback and use it for improvement, we're going to do that. One of the things that we're going to start producing is a fairly transparent picture of how our ministry hosts view us in terms of us helping them achieve their mission, how our participants view us in the context of how they are growing in community, intimacy, and mission, and at the end of the day, their reflection on us as a ministry delivering on the things that we commit to them when they walk through the front door. So there's going to be 5 things that we measure. In regards to our ministry partners, we don't have a baseline measurement yet. We're moving towards that. But I will tell you that I've had at least a half dozen to a dozen emails that I've not received before in the last 6 months from ministry partners saying something has changed. I'm not sure what it is, but as a function, I think of the combination of training, and I'll get to it in a moment, but I think the level of commitment of the people that are coming all the way through the process and joining us to go on this journey is going higher. We're getting people more aligned with who we are and what we're doing. And frankly, working more strategically alongside them and inviting them into the discussion is creating a framework where we can have more success as it relates to our ministry partners. The second thing is, and this is in its very early stages, I don't know if James is on the thing or not, but Scott was a participant in this last call. We have invited in representatives from partner ministries all around the world to an association that is going to work alongside our ministry to establish the standards of engagement from their perspective. And they're going to sit outside of Adventures and give us feedback as to how we're engaging in cross-cultural ministry, not from the view of us necessarily, but from the view of indigenous leaders who, when we're not there, are still walking out their mission. And so that is in movement. The next one is the Net Promoter Score, is something that is really encouraging to me. I won't get into the science of it, but Net Promoter Score is a baseline that is used by many organizations all around the world to define whether or not we are delivering on the promise that we made when they came in. And everyone from Chick-fil-A to Spectrum Internet to Compassion International uses the Net Promoter Score as a framework of measuring whether or not we're delivering to the people that we invite into this ministry what we said we were going to do. Anything above a 0 is considered in positive territory. Extreme success, some of the best companies are consistently around a 70. And I won't get into the math in terms of how it's calculated. When we first started measuring it, which only goes back within the last year, we were consistently in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. But I will tell you, our October launches across all launch windows in October just came back, and they were 80. So that is you guys doing a great job of delivering on the things that we said we were going to deliver on, and we've got to keep it up. The next piece is the engagement of parent through bases. Every day that I'm meeting with Bob and Joe and Betty, I'm getting a new story of an engagement email or a financial investment or a desire for a church to be remobilized back into the very place that they did ministry for with their racers or their gappers. So you're going to see in a minute, we've got a lot of potential there. The transition framework is expanding significantly. About a year and a half ago, long before some of this discourse happened on the Facebook page with our alumni, we recognized that our capacity to set expectations about what it means to continue a life on mission when you come home had some significant deficiencies in it. We began a process of changing both the way we set the race and gap up from the beginning, but also how we journey with them along the way and how we begin to transition them back home, of which 80% or so are going where? Right back where they came from, their hometown. So what does it look like to develop a network of support that helps them transition from this catalytic experience with us to going back into America where the values and the speed and the environment doesn't line up with what they've been experiencing for the last year? Between our partnership with M2B, to the landing zones, to the advocates that we have from their local church that we're training, to the nature in which we're communicating with them, we're investing deeply in that transition, and I think we're going to see some fruit over the long haul. We've got some other steps to take that you guys are going to start seeing coming out over the coming weeks. Feedback from that's redundant. I copied that and pasted it. So it was so good I put it on there twice. Ministry trends. This is a little bit of a cold bucket of water. And it's a little bit outside, frankly, of what I would have anticipated to be possible. So I'm going to give you two quick looks. I'm looking at ministry trends over the past 5 years to give you a pretty broad perspective. And then I'm going to talk about last year versus this year and how it compares against budget. But if you, the first column here is the program, our largest programs. The second column is the largest year of participants, the number of participants, what we projected for 19, and the percentage change. Okay? So for World Race, our biggest year was 2015. Based on our current projections, we will launch 45% less participants this year than we did in 2015. 19% down for GAP, 16 for semesters, 32 for ambassador. STM this year is really challenging. We're going to be somewhere probably between 50 and 65% down from where we were even a year ago. And then PVT, which is a real reflection, it's interesting because it's not down as much as the programs that it supports. So against the baseline of the number of people going, the number of parents going on the trips is actually improving. Current trend versus the budget. World Race is looking to be down over last year another 8%. A gap year is somewhere between 13 and the low 20s, with the midpoint being around 19. Semesters is looking to be down 8%, ambassador 29, short-term missions currently at about 60% down. Here's an interesting thing for you guys to consider, though, as we make this shift, is that the baseline of participants last year in 2018 was 2,205. This year, the traditional means of mobilizing short-term missions is going to do about 650, but the people going directly through the bases that are a function of longer-term relational engagement is going to be up to 225 people this year. So the movement from this transactional approach of marketing and getting individuals into the mix is beginning to shift. And I really believe, as a function of the way that we're stewarding PVTs through the basis today, next year we're going to see a pretty significant growth in that number. So the net of that is, from a budgetary perspective, and I'm not going to go into deep numbers, there's a significant implication of into our budget. So the next question is, why is this happening? What are the drivers behind this? What are we seeing? The first kind of parenthetic is outside of this ecosystem here in Gainesville. Shorttermmissions.com is one of the largest aggregators of short-term mission trips in the United States. They're seeing, depending on the ministry, he wrote a long paper that kind of looked into both what he sees happening, but also what the feedback is based on the demographics that those ministries serve in terms of mobilization, what he sees happening in each of those demographics. And I'll give you the high level. One is there's a general and significant downturn in short-term missions. The United States and our culture is, whether it be the broader church and the attendance in the church, which henceforth leads to the number of people going on short-term missions, is declining at a rapid pace. The range that he heard was between 10 and 40% on a year-over-year basis. So there's significant decline. The things that he heard consistently was some of the criticism that we have been at the end of receiving. The no white savior complex and volunteerism is something that was consistently coming up across all of their ministry partners. The next piece of this is a very rapidly changing value system in the predominant demographic that we serve. If you go back to the World Racing Gap chart, in terms of number of days on the field, that World Racing Gap represents a huge portion of the number of days that we mobilize people onto the field. And what's happening within that demographic is pretty significant. If you look at the top side of that, which would be millennials, which is probably the nature of most people sitting in the room today, there was a high value for changing the world. There was a high value for exploring the world. And there was a high value for releasing the things of the West and going and doing something that was a lot simpler. If you begin to look downstream from that to the folks that are coming in through Gap and frankly coming into the bottom of the race, because it's not like this beautiful dividing line, it's a changing value set over time, there are substantial things happening in Gen Z that are very different than what millennials value. So what are those things? Number one, they have a very high value for safety and security. They're not interested in grand experiences. They're interested in products that builds their portfolio. Barna would say that boomers, 10% of boomers embraced the 7 core tenets of evangelicalism. 7% of Gen X of the U.S. population embraced it. 4% of millennials, and somewhere between 2.5% to 3% of Gen Z. So things are changing for us rapidly. The mental health issue and the nature in which it's playing itself out, Tim and I were talking at lunch, I think in no small part a function of the way that they consume information, is radically changing. For millennials, the average clinically diagnosed anxiety disorder was 8% of the female population, 6% of the male population. In the Gen Z component, it's 12 and 9. So there's a 50% increase in people that the professionals are saying are clinically diagnosed as having anxiety disorder. There's some underlying drivers behind that. If you look at the use of mobile technology and its impact on social interaction, it's huge. The average person checks their phone about 40 some odd times a day. Millennials is in the low 70s, and Gen Z is in the low 80s. The average person in Gen Z spends approximately 5 hours a day on a handheld device. When we got our mental health survey results back that was done by a member of our alumni council, there were some interesting results if you kind of peel back the data and get beyond some of the talking points. 59% of people that went on the race said the race had the potential or had the impact of creating anxiety in their life that was unhealthy. So you look at that and you go, wow, what the heck's going on there? Then I started to do some additional research, and if you look at the American College of Psychological Associates, 61% say college as an experience produced anxiety in their life. So the race and college don't have a big gradient of difference between the two. But the big thing that is coming our way, and I don't want to say like a tidal wave, but if we don't look it in the eye, we're simply looking in the future and disregarding what's happening, is that Gen Z spends 40% less scheduled social time per week than millennials. And what did the mental health survey tell us? But the most anxiety-inducing engagement of the world race is being put on a team they couldn't get off of. So, in the context of that, we have these both sides of the coin of a ministry that seeks to establish the kingdom of God and go where he's working, and a constituent that journeys with us that has rapidly changing demographics, and our traditional way of mobilizing becomes a bit inconsistent with what we've done in the past. So the question is going to be, what do we do with that? Some other drivers. The alumni unrest. When we consider that some 60-odd% of or could be higher than that, depending on how you look at it, of our participants are word-of-mouth participants. They heard about the race from somebody else, and you have the level of discourse that was taking place amongst our alumni. There's no doubt that that's had some level of impact. The next piece is, and I've done a little bit of analysis on this, because I've done this in a prior life, of looking at the unemployment rate and its impact. But our unemployment rate amongst the demographic that we serve is down dramatically from what it was in 2008, 2009, 2010, when things were increasing significantly. Economic opportunity for people the ages of 19 to 24 is at right now one of the highest levels in the history of the United States. So I don't want to say we're competing against that, but I do believe that it's a driver behind why folks may not be coming here. The evangelical belief in church attendance is declining substantially. The broader framework of evangelicalism in the United States, I don't know how, is going the way of Europe. And it's going there pretty rapidly. We're making strategic shifts focused on mission that are impacting our participant engagement. Make no mistake that taking 50% of our short-term trips off the radar reduced our short-term sending. Make no mistake that taking gap year only to bases that limit the number of countries and experiences that they can have is likely going to reduce our participation. I would go a step further and say what we're doing with World Race is likely to have the same results. So in essence, we may be trading a participant for more focus on the nature in which we're engaging in our mission around the world, and that's a trade that we're willing to make. The next piece is certain elements of our field ministry did not meet expectations. I can put my finger on some very specific things, but the framework for GAP, going back a couple of years, was not suitable for the participants that we stewarded. It wasn't best case for us. Some of our disaster relief trips generally came back with poor feedback for us. There's a number of elements where we didn't deliver on the promise that we made to customers, and when that happens, word gets out. So I think that's probably had an impact on us as well. And the final piece is we've made a lot of changes to our marketing strategy. Some of them were good and worked. Some of them were quite expensive in the nature in which we did it as we tried to figure out ways to make the opportunity to journey with us aware to as many people as possible. But I do think in the midst of it, we've lost our voice a little bit. And in the midst of that, we're going to change it back. We're in the process of doing that. So I think our marketing changes may have stolen a little bit of our steam. So what are we doing in marketing today? I'm going very high level, But these are some changes that are underway as we speak. We're moving from quick conversion strategies to stories. We're shifting from social media advertising to more weighted to search-based. That's an important thing. Mike has been doing a lot of research on it. And instead of presenting the world race to someone that has never heard of it before and didn't know they were interested in it, rather spend our marketing dollars for people that are actually looking for it. They're in a search engine. They type something in that is somewhat related to what we do, and we spend our money in the place of presenting them those opportunities. So it's a shift of significance. We're working to reclaim our top search engine optimization results. Some of our strategies ended up taking our placement when people Googled short-term missions trip or Christian gap year missions trip, and we began to drop down that Google page to, in some cases, to the second page, where we used to claim 1, 2, and sometimes the top 3 in the organic search results. So there's some things that we need to do to get back into that, what is basically free advertising, because it returns an organic response to people that are actually looking for the type of ministry that we're engaging in. And we're going to focus on simplicity of participant experience. We eliminated the app fee. If you look at anybody else in our space, they did not charge an app fee until they were committed. We charge the app fee really close to the front end of the experience. We are streamlining the application. I don't know exactly how much we've streamlined it, but it had become bigger over time. And we have got a really strong team between Ashley and Courtney that have taken it and brought it into a more rational approach. And we're streamlining the interview and the advocates, bringing them in, making it highly relational. When we looked at it, to be honest, we weren't clearing a lot of folks out that shouldn't be with us. At that point, a lot of it would happen at training camp. So we looked at it and said, we think let's establish a relationship and start there and really engage in significant discussions when they get on campus. And we want to improve strategies for our capacity to tell stories. We actually have great stories to tell. We don't have to go out and create content. It's there. The Lord's moving. We get to be a part of it. And let's not lose the opportunity to be a witness to others through those stories. So the management plan, a very strong push. We've got a number of windows that are closing across our launch windows in the next 45 days. And we're doing a very strong push across STM, GAP, World Race, Ambassadors, and Semesters through our marketing. We are continuing to monitor progress very closely. One of the challenges with all the changes that we're experiencing that are outside of our control, with the changes in the generation, the changes in the economy, the changes in the church, you couple that with all the changes that we've made in marketing, trying to just figure out and do things better. And Jill and I spend a lot of time looking at things to make sure we make good decisions. And all I can tell you is history was a good predictor of the future. History is becoming a less and less reliable predictor of the future. And so we're trying to get our finger on the pulse of all of that so we do a good job of managing going forward. In terms of making any changes, reducing any squads, or doing anything like that, we don't have those defined right now. We really are just putting a hard press until we get to the middle of April. And about April 10th to 15th, we're going to be able to see with a very narrow variance how many folks are going to be in June, how many folks are going to be in August, how many folks are going to be in September, and what that's going to look like so we can take a more acute look at what our participant numbers are going to be. And in the midst of that, my commitment to you guys along the way is just to communicate very effectively, because we're obviously seeing the tides changing outside of the forecast. And my commitment to you is to express, to the best of my ability, the reality of where we are, and hopefully invite the sense of urgency where you can have an impact, to look for those areas for cost savings, to look to those areas to increase quality in terms of our field ministry, in terms of how we serve participants, to look to the areas of engaging new people into the ministry so that we can maximize our potential going forward. Make sense? So that's kind of a recap from the seat that I sit in, and I want to take a pause and open it up to anybody who might have any questions. And there's a number of folks on the live stream. And so Bob's got a microphone. So if you've got a question, he's going to wrap back around to you, and so you can share the question, and everybody that's not here can hear what you're saying or asking.
Somebody on the other side of the room.
So my question is, I feel like you spent a lot of time talking about the strategy for the race, which I get because it's our biggest program. But when it comes to like the survey that gauges whether participants are experiencing what we've promised them, and with a few other things that you mentioned, like the app fee and like things like that, I'm just curious about like when those types of strategies are going to be applied to the smaller departments at Adventures, because like you said, there are a lot of people who it's possible for them to not have a good experience or whatever, and then word gets out, and then, you know, and I think the World Race is such like a niche age group, but like STM, Beauty for Ashes, whatever, like they kind of span an older generation that's not necessarily associated with the race. There's like a whole pool of people there. So I'm just curious when some of that strategy is going to be added to improve those programs as well.
In terms of STM, I feel like we are already on that path. We changed the nature of engagement in STM before we made the changes with the routes for World Race. And I think we need to continue to build on that. The vision that I think we're moving towards, if you look at Swaziland, Scott and I joined together. The thing was already moving when I got to it, but 8 years ago, we started with what we're doing today in Guatemala, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Thailand, all the other locations, of beginning a long-term strategy of seeing what God is doing there, building vision for that for people that come, and providing practical ways for them to engage. And today, Swaziland has a lot of throughput and a lot of engagement that produces a lot of fruit on the ground even when they're not there. The vision for STM is the same here, that we continue to choose engagements that are highly relational, that they can invest in over time. It does not have to be basis. We're doing strategic ministry plans. How many of you all know James from ICM? James has taken over the strategic ministry plans for our strategic ministry partners that are non-basis. And he's developing those, and we will engage short-term missions and all of our other ministries in those more strategically. So from an STM perspective, we are seeing a significant challenge. I do feel like we are building, we have a lot of the strategies that we're talking about are very much being applied there. Beauty for Ashes, I would be out over my skis because I don't have enough intimacy with what you guys are doing and how it's playing out to answer the question. The thing that I would pose to you is let's sit down with the OLT and ask how can we help you guys apply these, and what resources do you need to do that, because I don't have that level of intimacy with it. That makes sense, Caitlin? Okay.
For other people. So you sat with marketing last week and spoke a little bit about the conversations the World Race is having in terms of iterating the experience and helping it lean a little more towards professional development in certain areas. Can you speak a little bit more about how that's going to apply towards our bases, if anything, to help?
Yeah, I don't right now, and I'm gonna go back to the regionals and clarify this. Right now, we're staying the course with World Racing. We've made some changes. We've got a clear path for what the next training camps are going to look like. We're staying the course. There's not professional development. There's community, intimacy, and mission. There are strategic objectives. With my discussion with you guys at a very high level, and I had about an hour discussion with the regionals yesterday, I began to seed a discussion around the nature in which Gen Z and some of this younger generation might engage with our mission, and how can we do it in a way to maintain the integrity of our engagement in the field such that it remains productive. That is vision discussion. That's about creating tomorrow. I had a mentor of mine that would say all the time, standing still is falling behind. And I remember one time I said, let's think about this strategically. And he looked at me and says, are you growing a mustache? And I thought, no. He goes, the answer is always. So the answer to your question is we have to be looking out always in terms of what's happening culturally in the field. How do we engage with that? What's happening culturally, demographically with the people that we serve, boomers, Xers, millennials, Gen Z, and how do we consistently determine how to serve? King David dealt with the same thing we're dealing with. He had to look at new songs and new wineskins to be an expression of the kingdom. And I'm going to continue to challenge us to look at those that we serve in the field, those that we serve as participants, and seek to remain true to our mission while at the same time engaging in a way that helps produce the fruit that we're called to produce as a ministry. Make sense? So a lot of times we immediately take vision and we draw it back to tactics. Like, what do we do? No. We're talking about tomorrow. We're dreaming a little bit. What is the next phase? What is God calling us to? How do we do that? How are people going to respond?
So it's clear that bases are pretty important overall to a lot of things. So it sometimes I think feels like they are out there, they're far off. There might be a little bit of a disconnect between what we do here day to day and the bases. So what can we do? What do we need to know? How can we as staff support the bases? I know that if they fall off, a lot of this falls apart. So what can we do to make sure that we are encouraging them, supporting them, telling those stories? I don't know. Can you kind of give us some ownership there?
Yeah, that's a good question, Reed. The first thing that I would say is we're given the opportunity, whether it's leading an STM trip. Andrew got to go out to Guatemala recently, where you might be able to jump on an STM trip and lead it to one of the bases, to establishing a relationship with some of the people, to recruiting the people that we need to the bases. We have a lot of places that we need some horsepower there. And what does it look like for us to cast vision for that? Those would be three ways to do it. I would strongly encourage any of you that have the possibility, the opportunity to go spend time. The stories that are happening there are really, really encouraging to me. Bases are not the only thing that we're doing either. I will tell you that we are going to continue to seek where God's moving. We're going to continue to seek as we build these new routes where there becomes a convergence and it makes sense for us to have a larger presence. And over time, we're going to move and adapt to do the right thing spiritually, from a leadership perspective, from a finance perspective, from every dimension, have greater context and relationship with those that we minister with.
I know from where most of us sit, we feel like we can't really control, we feel like we can't control the decline that we're talking about of participants. So what is it that we, kind of adding to Reed's question, just like what can we do where we sit in each of the roles that we have, besides calling all the Gen Z people that we know, not necessarily direct recruiting, but how can we be building strength in the spaces that we have ownership over when we feel like we can't necessarily control the factors contributing to the decline?
You know, I am most interested in faithfulness to our mission. We're an imperfect bunch. Leadership, we're an imperfect bunch. We are seeking the Lord. The text message that I was getting on my watch was Seth pausing to pray for this gathering. So our heart is for you guys, and our heart is for this mission. When we are excellent in our mission, how many of us, let me ask this question, how many of us see opportunities in our domain to improve whatever we're doing today significantly? There's the answer to your question. We need to have an appetite for excellence. The Apostle Paul dealt with this. He dealt with becoming complacent. He dealt with discord that showed a lack of unity in the body. And he dealt with the topic of excellence. He often compared his ministry to that of a race. And in comparing it to a race, he talked about, let me see if I can get this right. He talked about leaving everything on the court and falling across the finish line. That's the race I want to run. So I'm calling you guys to the same race. And in the context that we're in, we're gonna have to carry it like that. The days of us having the ability to have areas that are highly inefficient or not putting their hand to it hard or we're just not going to have that opportunity. It's a clarifying time for us, there's no doubt. We're going to have to stay focused on what's important. We're going to stay focused on the things that are going to take our mission and project it forward, and the rest of it will take care of itself.
Quick question. Would you like me to fix your watch for you?
It's kind of becoming my story, so I'm not sure if I want that or not. Can you mute that thing, please?
In
Erica.
the World Race alumni email update that a lot of us got, or maybe all staff got it, a couple of days ago, one of the points on it was about mental health and developing some framework. And one of the points was implementing face-to-face interviews for all World Race and GAP program candidates. And I meant to reply to the email, but so if this is the wrong forum to ask this question, redirect me. So is that just going to be reestablishing that training camp is the final phase of the interview, or is that a whole different process? Because when I read that, I thought, what on earth? How can that?
Let me share with you a little bit about that, and I'll bring some clarifying comments to the mental health component. There was some feedback to us and frankly, some recommendations with some energy in them that we should have counselors embedded in every squad. We should have counselors at every debrief. And we are responsible for stewarding people well. We do not have a high competency, nor is it within our mission to be mental health professionals. And I wanted to clarify that. That being said, I do believe with the reality of what we have coming at us, and frankly the reality of what we have happening amongst us today, that we can do better assessment on the front end with some policy and training. We can do better assessment on the field. When there are material issues that are specifically defined, we can get specific professionals to engage, to assess whether or not a person should be on the field. And we can create a framework of helping people get to where they need to be in a healthy way. That's our commitment, and we're actually going to have some mental health professionals in our space to help us get better at that. I think, Bill, it starts next Friday that engagement starts. So that ball is rolling. We're going to address those issues. In terms of face-to-face interviews, we've always had a policy that your last interview is at training camp. I'll give you guys a cool little note, and Bill, hold me to the numbers here. The last 2 training camps for World Race, we've not sent anybody home. That's like unheard of, and I don't really know how that happened, but it's really good, right? But at the end of the day, the training camp is the last assessment. And in the past, we've had the word that would be used maybe behind the scenes is yellow flags. We're not doing the yellow flags anymore. We're going to sit down with everybody, and we're going to have a one-on-one. And what Bill's working on is creating a framework where the training teams are capable of doing that, and that's going to happen at training camp.
You want your watch back?
Please.
It's okay on my TV.
I'm actually afraid to put this back on. I know you too well. All right. Any other questions? Casey.
Oh,
yes. Reliable question asker, I suppose. So some of us pray on Wednesdays, and I know that there's the general, I mean, some of us pray probably every day. That's a good check. Right, good job. Feedback right there. You're invited if you want to come. Anyways, so I know beyond, like, we were talking today about being tired of hearing kind of like the number count. It's a natural thing you need to talk about. We are obviously facing a decline, but like what can we specifically be praying for? And one of the things I would say is like connection between departments too, just because it can get easy to be very focused where your attention is and influence. So just like 3 big things that we could be consistently praying for.
I want to say this the right way because I don't want it to feel callous. I am not wringing my hands. I think I see the Lord doing some things amongst us that, having gone through a number of situations like this in 30 years of business and ministry, it brings things into focus. In the context of what we do here, I want to be obedient and faithful. And I'm not going to have a lot of boundaries for its impact on me. If the Lord calls us to it, I want us to have the perseverance to go after it. So that's one prayer. The second prayer is that any place that we've allowed either history or our own pride to have us to continue to replicate things that we do because we used to do them, that the Lord does not have intended for us, I have us a prayer that we would soberly look those things in the eye and be ready to walk away from them. I'm not interested in lukewarm. And to the degree you guys stick your hand under the faucet of lukewarm, I want to go somewhere else. There's 2. I can't come up with 3. But if you can pray for those on every day ending in Y, that would be really good. The final thing is about departments. What we've done over the last, really 2.5 years, as we've gone down 45%, is we've looked at every opportunity to bring efficiency and consolidate. And so, I'm getting ready to do some things that I wasn't doing 3 months ago. Not because I need another job, but because that's what needs to happen in this season. So, if we have a big influx into admissions, if we've got a training camp that doesn't have enough people in the kitchen, whatever it is, you guys just need to be prepared to take this hat off and grab one that doesn't fit very well and go do the job. So that's the best way to break down some walls between departments, is to not look at your department as a department, but looking at this as a mission. And if I see something happening over here in SQAs, or I see something happening on Ashley's squad that I can bring value to, I need to be ready to go jump into it. Anybody else? Matt Blair, you seem pregnant with thought. What's new? My commitment to you, go ahead.
Your outfit's pretty good today, man.
Thanks, John Frank. Coming from you, I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or not. Can you buy me a sweater? I'm not sure I'll wear it. Yep. All right, guys. Well, I commit to be consistent. It might be via email. We get something called the sales report. We get together as the LT. We review our progress against our ministry objectives. I'm going to start opening up windows into all of that stuff because I want us to come along together in that process. We are going to even open up some of this in the context of our alumni And I'm spending this much time on the alumni page ever again. We're going to give those folks a path to give us quality feedback. And where quality feedback comes, we are going to listen and we're going to respond. But I'm not going to respond to crowdsourced criticism. There's nothing fruitful in it. But to the degree that we can expose to them what we're doing and who we are and how we're trying to improve, we're going to do that. So that's our path forward. Bill, will you pray us out? You have enough juice left in you after a 46-hour flight from Mars, wherever you were?
Father, we thank you for this place. We thank you for the work you've done in each of our lives through this ministry, Lord. We thank you that you continue to entrust us with hundreds of your sons and daughters for a season of their lives to take them on a journey with you. And God, we just want to be faithful. I pray that you would continue to show us what that looks like. I pray that we would not walk in fear, but instead we would walk in perseverance, that we would endure hardship well, that we would learn from it. And Father, that we would increase our commitment to you, increase our commitment to each other and to the people that we're serving. Father, it's an honor and we thank you for it. We love you, Lord. Amen.